Hello, everyone. We're joined today by Darryn McClelland, Asiamet's new CEO, who's about to give a short update on the feasibility study progress to date. And Darryn is joining us from Perth, I believe, where he's been in workshops or planning to be in workshops for the rest of this week with Newpro Consulting, who are the lead on the feasibility study. Is that correct, Darryn?
Yes, that's right, Sasha. I was in Brisbane last week on Friday, meeting with our mine design engineering firm, AMDAD, and meeting with Newpro. Meetings today and also tomorrow before heading back to Jakarta.
Thanks, Darryn. Perhaps you could explain to the shareholders watching the call who Newpro are and who AMDAD are as well, please.
Yeah, sure. So Newpro selected as the lead engineering firm to complete the bulk of the feasibility study and also to complete the compilation of the updated feasibility study documentation. Newpro are an engineering firm based here in Perth, a relatively small firm, but quite specialised in their capabilities, particularly around heap leaching, copper leaching, hydrometallurgy. So, good recent experience particularly in copper heap leach SXEW projects, which is of course, directly applicable to the work we're doing on the BKM copper project. AMDAD have been our mine design engineer from very early in the project's phase, back I think all the way back into 2017. So the principal of AMDAD, John Weish, extremely experienced mining engineer, and has a very broad range of experience across a whole range of different commodities, different mining situations, etc. So very extremely capable engineering group, and the principal, John, is working on is dedicated to our project. In terms of the resources within AMDAD. So John also works on other projects, but certainly his experience has been valuable in reviewing and updating some aspects of our feasibility study we're taking forward. Into the feasibility study update, it's full steam ahead. Lots of work progressing on multiple fronts. So just a slight recap. Through the second half of 2021, we investigated options as part of a value engineering activity, looking at possible opportunities for increasing extraction of copper from the BKM resource. And there are several options considered. We looked at different opportunities for maybe making a flotation concentrate, potentially treatment of that concentrate. Main challenge or issues were around the quality of copper concentrate we could produce, and then the limited markets with which that could be sold to. And taking it further down the value chain was very high in capital costs, and really that capital intensity just didn't justify. Wasn't justified for even the improved copper recovery resource. So based on the outcome of that, as was reported, we have committed to progressing BKM's development by updating our 2019 feasibility study, utilising heap leaching of copper to produce copper cathode for direct sale. Initially, this was expected to be a relatively straightforward update of the FS from 2019 feasibility study. However, there's some conditions which are related to the previous study which have changed and need to be assessed in more detail. Newpro Engineering were engaged to commence work on that FS update in April 2022, and MDAD Consulting have been engaged to update the BKM Pit Optimisation, and that information will flow through into detailed mine design and production scheduling. We did engage an independent technical expert to complete a review of the 2019 FS and provide guidance on requirements to move that FS into a stage of it being bankable, so to the level of detail that would be required to allow us to take the project forward for debt financing with an appropriate banking syndicate. Full steam ahead, multiple work fronts progressing, aiming to deliver information by early Q4. We will intend to update our shareholders next month to give further information on how the FS is progressing. But certainly a lot of good work has been done to date, and is continuing.
Thanks, Darryn. Could you please explain the term bankable when it applies to the feasibility study, and whether you expect this to be the final iteration of the feasibility study prior to construction?
Yes, certainly. As can be appreciated, the 2019 FS was completed in late, well, the previous version was completed in late 2019, and is done to a feasibility study, I guess close to a definitive feasibility study level in terms of what we want to take forward to the banks for financing. There's a next level of detail and estimation which is expected to be able to be presented to the banks for more, I guess, the next level of surety in terms of the project financials, operating costs, capital costs, to allow us to be able to put forward the appropriate package for financing. So it's really a next level of detail, and for the update of the BKM FS, certainly, there is, it's 2.5 to 3 years since the last FS was done, and certainly there's been a significant number of things that have changed over that period of time, and it's appropriate to update that feasibility study prior to requesting interaction with banks on financing. So one of the important steps, and it's probably a little bit unique in some projects, is we, as a group, Asiamet, we took on a bank-recommended engineering consultancy, engaged as an independent technical expert, or ITE, to conduct a review of the 2019 FS documentation and to give us feedback on preparedness for bank financing. One of the outcomes of that was a conclusion that there were no fatal flaws with the project, although it was recognised that various work streams would do with updating, and a number of the things that were recommended by the ITE were already covered in our scope of work for updating the feasibility study with our relevant consultants. There were some additional items which the ITE recommended that we should also address, and so we have taken that on board. Some of those areas are assessing some additional aspects of geotechnical requirements and hydrogeology requirements for the open pit, as well as updating information with respect to the water balance on the site and the overall water management strategy. So those aspects are included as part of our update of the feasibility study that we're doing now.
Yeah, so Darryn, just a question which I think will probably help investors a bit regarding the IT review. Could you explain the significance of having this piece of work done early?
Yeah, sure. I guess possibly in a traditional sense, Sasha, that people will work through a feasibility study, expect to get it to a bankable phase, and then go to the banks, and the banks will engage an independent technical expert to review the project to assess its bankability. In our case, we felt it was appropriate to in a sense conduct that phase early and assess the original, the 2009 feasibility study, and I guess get an early run or early information on the areas that the bank's ITE will expect to be done to a certain level when they come to look at approving it for the bank to take forward for financing. So in effect, we've done that work, some of that work early. So we intend to have those areas covered, and when we come to reviewing this with the banks and their ITE, then we should have covered off on the items that would be expected to be that the ITE has recommended from their initial review.
Okay, thanks. So the ITE basically has been working for Asiamet on this side, but usually they'd be on the other side of the fence working for the bank. When we go down to the financing route again, will the same ITE be working for the bank on the financing side? That's
the intention, yes. So effectively, the ITE has finished their scope of work with us. They've given us their review of our feasibility study, and that's what we're working to. They definitely switch over to being responsible to the reporting to the banks and not reporting to Asiamet. So that will be the independent process when we come to discussion with the banks on financing and looking at the project.
So the ITE is just an acronym, but could you potentially, you're not allowed to reveal who they are yet, but are you able to provide a bit of context as to the type of organisation sitting behind the three letters ITE, please?
Yeah, sure. It is a tier one engineering consultancy, with particular, certainly with extensive expertise in mining resource projects. So it's an engineering consultancy that has available to it all of the disciplines that are required to complete these levels of study. So potentially, if you were doing a study like this, from early on, you may engage a company like this, and they will have all of the discipline experts that are able to contribute to a full feasibility study and are fully versed on all of the levels of study and all of the requirements that need to be met as you progress through the levels of study, from scoping to pre-feas to feasibility to definitive and bankable. So the group that we engaged with and the banks will be engaging with is definitely a highly experienced tier one consultancy that do this type of work is a big part of is their bread and butter. It's what they do for clients.
Darryn, what's the reason why we can't reveal who the group are?
I think it's appropriate to sort of certainly ensure that keep a level of independence with their work with the banks and taking on our project and giving us our feedback. I think it's appropriate that because they're switching over to the banks, that it's not sort of appropriate and necessary for us to say who that group was. Other than that, certainly the feedback that was given was very very well considered, and as looking at the information which has been provided, it was encouraging that a lot of the things that were raised were things that we had already identified in our own internal reviews and were part of the scopes of work for the update. But there is a couple of additional things that they felt needed to be addressed in some more detail, which we have included in the scope. So.
Okay, so speaking of the banks, we've already announced that we've appointed a lead bank to run the debt process. So at what point will you be able to reveal who they are, and what can you tell us about them at this stage?
I think we'd like to be able to announce more details on that as we come to announce the completion of the feasibility study, Sasha. So when we announce the results of our feasibility study update, I think that's an appropriate time to be able to discuss, who we've been in discussions with, in preliminary discussions with respect to debt financing and the lead bank. So I think that's an appropriate time. There are also know your customer requirements that the lead bank needs to do on behalf of with respect to Asiamet, as well as Deloitte as our potential strategic partner.
Okay, thanks. Will they be acting on their own or as part of a consortium of financiers?
They would be there will be a lead bank, but there will be intended to be a consortium of banks as part of the debt financing process.
Okay, so more on that later then.
Yeah, yes. So moving into some more specific details of the feasibility study update. Some of the things that we've been working on thus far. Reviewing the pit optimisation of the BKM pit. Certainly there's been changes in terms of operating costs over the course of the last 3 years. So we have been reviewing certainly the mining input costs, looking at the likely fleet that would be employed at BKM, and mining costs have been based on a contract model. So there's no capex for mining fleet. The amortization of fleet is included in the mining rates that we are assessing at the moment. Processing costs being updated on the current circuit material balance produced by Newpro, and updated cost estimates for labour, power and consumables. It's not final. The final details will come from the feasibility study, but is the best current data we have for input into a revised pit optimisation. So this cost base represents our best knowledge at this point in time. The general layout of the mine and its associated facilities, heap leach, waste rock, those locations as they're shown in this slide generally haven't changed. Maybe some slight optimization of some of the infrastructure, particularly around the heap leach pad, is part of the work that we're doing now. So there might be some slight changes there, but the overall layout is generally the same from the 2019 work.
So with Deloitte as the second largest contract mining company in Indonesia, would they be able to bring positive synergies to the contract mining model?
Yeah, definitely, Sasha. And it is our intention to utilise Boomer, Doid's operating entity, to provide input into the feasibility study costing and using a contractor model for their assessment. And of course, as the largest second largest mining contractor, in Indonesia by volumes, they have a unique position in terms of being able to have discussions and negotiations with fleet providers, which is quite critical at this point in time. Having good relationships with the equipment suppliers, particularly of mining fleet, is incredibly important, because there are known challenges around supply of equipment. So engaging, engaging with such a large contractor in the country who buys large volumes of fleet from the OEMs, being able to synergize and get access to those sort of procurement strategies as part of developing the mining cost model for BKM, I think will be very useful, as opposed to maybe KSK, Asiamet and our operating entity PTKSK going out and trying to source that equipment ourselves. When such a smaller entity, we don't have obviously the significant buying power that someone like Boomer does have with the OEM. So definitely some good opportunities there.
So what's going on with Doid in terms of discussions in the background, other discussions in the background at the moment? Can you?
So our interactions with Doid are on two levels. If we look at for the feasibility study update, there's a set of discussions that we've had and engagement that we wish to gain access to Doid and Boomer's experience in terms of project execution and development, and looking at their inputs into our feasibility study update. Already spoken about the mining costs is one opportunity for the update, as well as looking at the civil earthworks and some other activities associated with the project construction. So our intention is to utilise them as one, as a group, to provide us data for our feasibility study update. With respect to our corporate engagement with Doid, we still are actively engaging with them. Certainly, as we're aware, Doid have also been fairly busy in their own corporate activities related to their other businesses in the coal space. So certainly have been very busy in certain activities there over the course of probably the last 3 to 4 weeks. But some very recent engagements and discussions have shown that they still are very interested in continuing the engagement with Asiamet and looking at continuing to take through and help and support the development of the BKM project. And those engagements remain, and we hope to be able to share information on those interactions very soon. That being said, it's been incumbent on us to understand other potential sort of opportunities that may be out there, and there have been positive engagements with other parties who've shown a particular interest in the KSK contract of work and the BKM copper project. So those discussions are also advancing with other parties, and some of those are one group in particular is advancing quite quickly. So we can't share too many details of those under the confidentiality agreements, but certainly it's been encouraging that other groups are seeing value that we see in the copper resources and copper reserves that we have on, and the prospectivity for the KSK contract of work.
Thank you, Darryn.
Okay, Sasha, looking at the work that Newpro Engineering is doing, some key points here. Request for pricing for key processing equipment's being issued. Optimization, significant amount of work on optimization of some of the key areas of the project, particularly around the design of the heap leach pad, and also looking at our water management and treatment technologies. These were two really key areas that we felt needed some attention from, I guess, the approach that was recorded in the 2019 feasibility study, and what we see as some better opportunities to take forward in our updated FS. certainly doing a lot of work on understanding our construction materials balance and how the earthworks are going to work across the entire site for its development. And Newpro, as I mentioned before, have provided input into the pit optimisation update in terms of updated processing operating costs from the early work we've done on the materials balancing and the production profile. They've also commenced developing the detailed CapEx model for the BKM project, utilising a level of current input costs. Importantly, the heap leach earthworks represent probably the single most significant capital cost area, and there's a real focus of attention on understanding our scope of work, and that is why we are also keen to get an estimate of that activity from within Indonesia. It's important that we get Indonesian costs for that earthworks requirement because it is such a significant part of the CapEx. So that's why we're intending to utilise Boomer's infrastructure team to be able to give us a good capital cost estimate for that exercise, and for the remaining earthworks associated with the project for input into the feasibility study.
Okay, thanks, Darryn. I've got to ask a question on inflation, and given the levels of inflation in the world seen as of late, what we're doing to curb the project input costs.
Yeah, it is a challenge, Sasha, and I mean there's two aspects to the project cost. One is the capital cost for construction of the plant, and the other is the operating costs. From a capital construction perspective, I think really important to focus on a couple of key areas. One is to make sure that we are using accurate Indonesian construction costs, particularly for what I've just spoken about in earthworks, and using good, competent contractors that also have a level of scale that allows them some leverage to get their own operating cost structure into a good space. And what I mean from that is using a contractor, for example, that may have access to good costs for diesel fuel. So diesel fuel is one of the biggest operating costs for construction earthworks, or for any earthworks, mining, etc. So working with a group that is such a large mover of material in Indonesia, and being able to leverage off the fact that good access to fuel pricing and other activities is really important for us to look to be optimising the costs for construction. In terms of our fixed plant equipment costs, certainly looking at opportunities for lower cost sourcing, and looking for opportunities where we can source the majority of our equipment from within Asia. Certainly there's some opportunities for potentially some lower capital equipment costs, looking at some lower cost sourcing models. So that's being able to compare and contrast some of the costs from different areas of manufacturing is going to be important. And of course, looking at being able to, if we can source more locally, then of course, transport logistics costs will be lower. So they're probably a couple of the key areas from a capital cost perspective. From an operating cost perspective, again, there's been some challenges. There are increases in input costs, and we're looking at opportunities for, probably looking at opportunities for how we can maybe stage some of the activities that we're doing, and be able to step out, step out some of the activities over time, as opposed to bringing those things up front in the project. So I guess that's important for us. We've really got to focus on what needs to be done at the very start to be able to get into first production, and then look at what are the things that we can do, sort of as the project is generating its own cash flow, and we can step some of those things out. So that's probably a bit of a mix of both CapEx and operating capital costs, and operating costs are also part of that review as well. So,
okay, thanks for the detail there, Darryn. Look, another key input is the price of the underlying commodity itself. Obviously, in copper, we've seen drop off to levels of $3.6, $3.7 per pound today, from trading in the high fours and closer to $5 a pound for the past year or so. Could you please clarify what price? Are you able to clarify at this stage what price we're going to use in the feasibility study, which I think the last one was based off 3.2?
Bit hard. I'd report that, and when we come to reporting the final outcomes of the feasibility study, of course we'll be as part of that, we'll be sharing what our copper price has been used for undertaking the feasibility study. I won't give the figure now, but we use long-term consensus pricing, so it's a consensus of a significant number of the banks, traders, investment houses that look at the long-term copper price, and that's what we'll be using for our feasibility study update. I think it's fair to say, and having discussions with some people recently, certainly the floor price for new copper projects to be considered being brought on stream has certainly raised up significantly over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, and the incentive price for new copper projects has come up significantly, and agree that the copper price has tapered off a bit in the last 4 to 5 months. Most likely through some due to some uncertainty about where things are heading with global growth and some activities there. But the longer term outlook for copper still remains very strong with the world looking at its decarbonisation and electrification programs over the course of the next 15, 20, 25 years. So I think, whilst we might see some maybe considered some short-term softness in the commodity pricing and copper pricing, then I think that is not something that is necessarily going to be the case for the long term. Onto transport logistics. This is such a significant requirement for this project. The transport logistics requirements for the BKM project are significant, and it is a real focus area for the team. We've had good positive interactions with government departments, confirming the requirements related to road transportation and the current situation in central Kalimantan, which has been very encouraging. We have engaged with an experienced transport logistics service provider, PT Transcontinent, to help us complete logistics surveys and provide updated indicative rates as not only rates, but also a methodology, stepping through exactly the methodology of transportation, discounting once material is within Indonesia, how exactly we're going to move that from the main port, which is going to be Surabaya most likely Surabaya in the east in East Java, across to central Kalimantan and up through to the site. One of the key aspects about transport logistics also is we have a long section of road which is a forestry access road, and there's going to be a requirement for us to do some upgrading and improvement work on that access road for project execution, to bring in some of the larger loads which we need to bring in for project construction, but also for the longer term day-to-day use and logistics requirements for the site. So we have had that road assessed by an experienced civil engineer and surveyor, and a plan for the upgrade activities has been completed on that, and that will also be part of an exercise to get a detailed cost estimate for that activity as part of the feasibility study update.
Okay, thanks, Darryn. So is this transport piece largely complete then, or how much work's left to do on this?
Still a work in progress, Sasha. I mean, we've had personally, myself and the project manager, we've had several sessions with Transcontinent. They have spent over a week inside central Kalimantan, meeting with all of the ports and doing the site surveys and route surveys. We had a clarification meeting with them about a week and a half ago, just to make sure we're all on the same page with respect to how we were thinking about the transport and logistics and some of the early things that they'd come up with. So they're working through now basically a plan to say, this is the equipment, this is how material will be mobilised in containers, this is how we'll manage containerised equipment, this is the type of equipment we'll need, and looking at giving us effectively a cost estimate for the life of mine, so they can understand their fleet requirements, what the amortization and cost of that fleet will be, etc. So that's a good work. That's work in progress, and it will be finalised as part of the FS update.
Okay, thanks.
Another key enabler of this project is power supply. We are looking at between 15 to 20 megawatts of base load. Diesel power generation remains a base case option. It is, of course, the lowest CapEx because we would not have to purchase generator sets, but it is, of course, the highest OpEx with high diesel consumption. So, I mean, it's really important for us to continue investigating lower cost options for delivery of power to the site. It is the major consumable, and achieving the lowest cost of power delivers the highest level of return. Importantly for the project, the situation with respect to grid power in central Kalimantan has improved significantly over the last 3 years with additional transmission capability. There has been some additional generation capacity added, but in particular transmission infrastructure as well as substations. So, we now, compared to 3 years ago, are in a better place to consider the option of grid power. And so we are engaging with the state-owned electricity company, PLN, via a memorandum of understanding to explore our options available to supply grid power to BKM. We are also, so that is definitely one avenue where we're moving down, and we have kicked off a scoping study looking at the possible option for renewable energy and in particular biomass. Solar, we have investigated to some degree, but sort of our location is not really amenable to be particularly efficient for solar power generation. With too much cloud cover and the climatic conditions just aren't particularly favourable there. So, but of particular interest is biomass power, and the source of energy, the biomass, would largely come from palm oil plantations. The outer husk of the palm fruit is a significant waste which usually just sort of sits on the ground and degrades over time. So there is an opportunity to use that as a fuel for a biomass power station. Potentially some other feedstock from some agricultural areas, also potentially some from wood processing as well. So. Yeah, so we're keen to explore that. Some initial feedback on potential costs for that was quite attractive. So yeah, we think that is, given our location and the sources that are available, one of the key, we felt that it was a strong enough case to at least take that to a scoping study level. Probably one of the key aspects of that scoping study will relate to feed supply. So ensuring that there would be a consistent feed supply of biomass that could feed this power station. So that's exciting. That's being done in cooperation with an Indonesian company and also engaging with an Australian company who's has significant expertise particularly in renewable energies, and biomass is one of the technologies that they are familiar with. And really important that delivery of power for BKM enables any future development of the KSK contract of work. It's really power is needed for any processing operating facility that may be envisaged for the future of needed for BKM and for anything that is required for the future of the KSK contract. So certainly, the BKM is supporting the implementation of a power solution, as part of this project, but it certainly enables any future development for BKZ or other opportunities we have for the contract. All right, on to some comments on permitting. Our most significant, I guess the most significant permit which is being undertaken at present is what we had called the Pinjam Pakai or borrow to use permit. So effectively conversion of production forest into use for other purposes, and in this case mining. So the final permit is now referred to as a PAK, an area of work, like it's a work area determination. The final permit, so we have a conditional permit which was issued in April of this year. Our final permit requires 4 items to be completed. We've completed 3 of those items. In short, one of them is effectively pegging our entire boundary for our the permit boundary. So we've completed that activity. We have signed an MOU with the forestry concession holder for the work area. So back on the aerial photograph of the of the BKM area, the red outline that was on that photo is actually the boundary associated with this permit. So we have pegged that boundary. We've also completed an assessment of the compensation cost for the forestry resources in there, which is required under the regulations to be paid to the forestry concession holder. We have an MOU, and we have an MOU signed with the forestry concession holder, which relates to that compensation payment, which we have completed. Part of the regulations for this permit is to undertake rehabilitation of an impacted area of the same size as the concession, as the area that is being held is being converted for this concession. So effectively, it's almost like it's like an offset program. So we have to go and we're going to be I guess effectively rehabilitating an impacted area of close to 1,000 hectares in another part of Kalimantan as part of the permit issuance for this for our conversion of this forestry area. So we've engaged with we have the areas selected. We have the work requirements. We've actually working through selecting the final contractors for that activity. So we'll be in place to have that to be able to commence. That work has to commence after we get our final permit. So we're well advanced on that. And the final activity which we're working through is an agreement to use the forestry corridor, the access road. So there's two owners of that access, two holders of concessions on that access road, and we need to complete MOUs for the use of that access road, common use of that access road. So we'll be working through that and hopefully complete those activities within the next 1 to 2 months, and then we'll aiming to get our final permit before the end of this year.
So Darryn, you've obviously had a lot of experience with permitting in country. So do you see the remaining steps as being quite straightforward?
I think they will be relatively straightforward, Sasha. We only have one final step, and we've been engaging with the corridor holders, and still, yes, we've had several meetings with them, and just working through, I guess, some early thinking on how we will use or how we will share that access road, and particularly how we'll operate and maintain the access road. But we don't need to close out all of those details for the MOUs that need to be signed. But there's still some desire to just get some early thinking on how that's likely to work before we sign the MOU. So I'm confident that we can complete those MOUs by the end of next month. We also have a mini impact assessment being undertaken for exploration, and this is an area of the property outside the BKM area, but it is one of the areas that permit is going to be related to is for looking at a limestone source which is on our KSK contract of work, and I'll explain why that's important a little bit later. And we are also reviewing the ongoing permitting requirements. Once our FS update has been completed and we want to look to move to construction and operations, there are a series of some permitting and documentation updates which are required to be submitted to our mines department in Indonesia, as well as the Ministry of Environment. So we're working through to understand what those permitting requirements are and looking at the plans that will be needed to complete those once we have our FS update. Okay, and in terms of some of the focus areas of the update, just to reiterate on these, continuing delivering on the plan of agreed activities from the ITE review, working with BUMA, as we've mentioned before, Lloyd's Mining Services business, to providing input to the FS in these key areas that they have skills that are of direct relevance to these. So, of course, the mining services schedule of rates, process plant, heap leach, earthworks and civil construction, site ancillary facilities such as explosive magazine, workshops and accommodation. These are things these are activities that they do on other sites as part of their infrastructure development. Of course, updating our capital model. As I mentioned, it's critical we do not overcapitalise the BKM heap leach. We know that the heap leach material available at BKM there is a volume, and looking at what the future looks like for the overall KSK contract of work, there are some potential maybe some smaller satellite secondary copper deposits, but we're looking at probably more primary deposits, polymetallics, which are not necessarily heap leachable. So important that our BKM heap leach is fit for purpose. We don't overcapitalise. Very important we don't overcapitalise that facility. Of course, finalising the power supply model, as we've discussed, and also the transport logistics methods and the unit costs for those. We have already spoken about the planning for ongoing permitting requirements, evolving from the FS update, of course. And then the final one is looking at a preliminary drilling investigation into a limestone resource that we have on the KSK contract of work. I'll explain the reasons that that's important here and the opportunities. A local limestone deposit, there is a known limestone occurrence, significant limestone occurrence known, which is within 12 kilometres of the BKM site on our contract of work. It needs some basic exploration work, but it has the potential to significantly reduce the use of limestone, a local limestone source, has the potential to significantly reduce our processing costs by reducing how much imported lime product we need to bring in from outside. So, part of our process, part of the process requirements for the heap leach facility is going to be neutralisation of acid and iron from our processing streams, and that at the moment our base case is inclusive of importing lime from Surabaya across to the contract. So, that comes at a significant cost. That's in our current operating cost model. But if we can confirm and confirm the limestone deposit, confirm its quality, and certainly from early indications, it looks like it would be big enough to supply the needs for the project, then we would be able to replace a significant proportion of our imported lime with a local limestone product. And haven't worked out the exact cost savings, but the potential runs in the millions of dollars a year of cost savings. So that's definitely something that we won't be able to do that activity. We won't be able to understand this limestone deposit at the time we complete the FS update, but it's definitely something that we'll be progressing and wanting to include in the future. It will definitely be an opportunity that is recorded in the FS update. Other opportunities I mentioned there is in terms of additional ore for the heap leach, there is some prospective secondary copper anomalies which are within reasonable distance to BKM. Our current intention is that these would be investigated once our project's in production and the resource development drilling can be funded internally. That's our corporate plan to get BKM in production, and then utilise cash flow to allow us to investigate other really interesting prospects which are interesting from both a soil geochemistry and also some of the other geophysical work that has been done on site that really shows some perspective. I think probably some smaller deposits, but certainly some smaller incremental potential secondary copper which can be included as part of the mine life for BKM. And just to reiterate, BKM is an enabling project. Infrastructure established for this project supports the future development of the KSK contract of work, a long-term power supply, processing equipment that could be reused for future processing, logistics infrastructure, operational facilities, and a workforce competence. Developing a local workforce that is capable of moving on to projects as we move forward into developing the KSK contract further. Sasha, final slide here. This is on some broader themes, and we've sort of discussed some of this as we've gone through. Of course, copper pricing, recent copper pricing has been under some pressure, of course, from where it was towards the start of the year and through most of last year. I mean, it's been encouraging that we've seen it firming up from recent lows. I think our copper price dropped to around $3.20, $3.25 at its lowest point sort of 4 or 5 weeks ago, but seeing it bounce back to sort of the $3.60, $3.65 level is encouraging and is maybe reflective of where a base price of copper is sitting now, moving forward. I guess some of the recent reductions in commodity pricing will have eased input pricing for materials of construction, which is good for us looking at wanting to consider construction of a project in the next sort of 12 to 24 months. Completing construction of a project within the next 24 months. Potentially there's a window of opportunity that presents itself to build a new project when some of those input prices have come off their recent highs. So, I think that's an opportunity that I think is unique to us in being at that ready stage to be able to launch into something before potentially, metals, people start to realise that the metals complex is supply demand dynamics are going to be such that you'll see higher input prices coming back. So the thematic for metals associated with decarbonisation, electrification have not gone away. If anything, it's strengthening. The Inflation Reduction Act in the US and the serious, the significant investment which is looking into electrification and decarbonisation is just one example of governments around the world that are still pushing hard to move in that direction. And anything to do with decarbonisation and electrification, particularly electrification, copper has to benefit. With supply deficits forecast from 2025, building a new copper project over the course of the next couple of years is a real opportunity to start producing into that dynamic. So I think that's really unique. We have a strong portfolio of copper assets. We have reserves in the ground. We have resources in the ground. Those have not gone away. We have important base metals resources at KSK, and we are confident that there is more of that once we get an opportunity to start exploring and drilling further. There is great value in those in situ resources, and we'd expect that the realisation of that value is apparent when we can successfully deliver execution of our first operational project and allow us to be able to look at developing that pipeline of projects. As we've said before, getting started is often the hardest part, and that's where we need to get to. It's at this stage really focusing on there's obviously things we need to focus on for in our corporate objectives and discussions with other parties, but also have to be focused on delivering this FS, because this updated FS is the key to us unlocking debt funding for development of BKM, and that's that is a key plank in what we want to do as a business.
Yeah, thanks, Darryn. So just on the topic of value, we've obviously seen a lot of focus on copper M&A in the market, especially with a number of moves by a couple of the majors recently, in fact. So Asiamet obviously has a lot going on in the background. What would you say to the current share price valuation?
Oh, it's disappointing as it would be for all shareholders, and I guess valuing resources companies is done in a number of ways, but in terms of M&A transactions, groups are typically looking at what they will pay a company for the value of the reserves that they have quoted, and the value sometimes, not always, but at a lesser value, the resources that a group has in the ground. And if you look at valuation metrics in terms of what groups have and what we have in terms of resources and reserves, and particularly reserves for copper at this stage, resources in copper, resources in base metals, our share price is undervalued. But there are reasons for that, and execution of our plan is key to building confidence in the market and in our shareholder base, and building confidence in the share price, and we have to push through, and of course the corporate activities which we've spoken about and certainly are very important, and also delivering an outcome for this updated FS and showing people that we have a good robust project to take BKM forward and start developing our first mine is really important. So I mean, I can say that I think our share price is undervalued, but it's where it is at the moment, and we need to be working hard to turn that around. That's our job, and delivering on the things that we say is a way to achieve that.
Okay, so lots going on in the background. I think this has turned out to be a much longer overview than intended, but I think you've covered quite a lot here. Potentially, we could do this more often and smaller bite-sized chunks in the market.
Sure. Yeah.
If you're
agree, Sasha. Agree. Yeah. No. Yeah. Agree. And apologies for this being probably as long between sort of the first introduction and this update. I'd like to make a commitment to doing this definitely more regularly with you. So and talking to our shareholders. Okay.
All right. So lots going on in the background, and hopefully more updates soon, both operationally and potentially on the corporate side as well. Is that fair to say?
Yes, that's fair to say.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Darryn.
Excellent. Thanks very much for your time, Sasha. And
thanks. Getting late there, and we'll hopefully hear from you soon.